The day she said it, the whole porch went quiet. Even the wind that usually combed through the tall prairie grass seemed to pause, as if the land itself was listening. And she stood there with her boots half buried in dust, her dress stretched tight across a body that had known childbirth, hunger and long winters, her cheeks flushed not from shame but from the weight of being seen and judged all at once. And she lifted her chin just enough to keep her voice from shaking as she said, "No one marries a fat widow, sir. But I can work." And the words fell between her and the cowboy like a gauntlet thrown in the dirt. She had buried her husband in the early spring after fever took him quick and cruel, leaving her with debts, a small patch of stubborn land, and a reputation that traveled faster than any stagecoach. Because in small towns, grief is rarely private, and a woman alone is always a topic. And since the funeral she had heard the whispers that she was too big, too loud, too opinionated, too much of everything a man might not want, and not enough of what a man might desire, as if desire were the only measure of a woman's worth. So she had come to the ranch not to beg, but to bargain, her hands rough from splitting wood, her back strong from hauling water, her heart hardened by nights spent staring at a ceiling that echoed with memories. And when she told him she could work, she meant she could mend fences, break horses, cook for a crew, keep accounts in her head better than most men could on paper, and endure sun and scorn without bending. The cowboy watching her was known for being a man of few words and steady eyes, the kind who measured people not by gossip, but by grit. Yet even he felt the sting of what she had said, because in her voice there was no plea for pity, only a statement carved from experience. And behind him the ranch hands shifted uncomfortably, some out of embarrassment, others out of the quiet realization that they had laughed at similar jokes before. She stood waiting for dismissal, ready to shoulder another log of rejection like the one she carried from her wagon that morning. And in that waiting there was history, years of being told to shrink, to apologize for taking up space, to accept less because she did not fit a picture painted by someone else's shallow brush. She had once been a girl who dreamed of dancing at county fairs, who believed love was measured in gentle glances and warm kitchens. But widowhood had stripped her illusions and left only resolve. And as she faced the cowboy, she felt the old familiar ache of bracing for a blow, not from a fist, but from a sentence that would confirm what the world kept telling her, that she was unchosen. Yet beneath the ache was defiance, a refusal to let her story end in someone else's judgment, because she had survived too much to surrender to opinion. The sun dipped lower, stretching shadows long across the porch, and still she held his gaze, daring him to reduce her to a punchline, daring him to see beyond flesh and fabric into the furnace of her spirit. And though she did not know it yet, this moment, raw, humiliating, brave, would become the turning point not just of her own life, but of every person who would later hear her story and recognize a piece of themselves in the courage it took to stand there and say, "I can work," when the world insisted that was all she was good for. And if you have ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed before you even opened your mouth, stay with this story, because what happened next would ripple far beyond that dusty porch and into the hearts of anyone who has ever been told they were not enough. The cowboy did not laugh, did not look away, did not let the silence stretch into cruelty. And when he finally spoke, his voice was low but carried the weight of truth that makes people straighten their backs. And he said, "Ma'am, a woman who can bury a husband, carry her own wood, and still stand tall enough to ask. Well, work isn't asking to be married, she's asking to be respected." And the words struck her harder than any insult ever had, because they were not soaked in mockery but in recognition. And for a moment she forgot to breathe. He stepped down from the porch, boots hitting dirt with deliberate calm, and continued, "If a man can't see the strength in that, he doesn't deserve to stand beside you. And if this ranch is smart, it won't just give you work, it'll give you a place." And behind him, the ranch hands shifted again, this time not in discomfort, but in something closer to shame, because they understood that they had measured her by the wrong scale. The widow felt something crack inside her, not from hurt, but from the sudden release of carrying every judgment alone. And in that crack light poured in, warming corners she had kept cold to survive, and tears threatened, but she refused to let them fall. Not because tears were weakness, but because she wanted to hear every word clearly. The cowboy did not offer marriage, did not offer romance, did not rescue her in the way stories often pretend women need rescuing. Instead, he offered partnership in labor, dignity and opportunity, and a fair wage for honest effort. And that was more powerful than any proposal. The next morning, she was on the field before sunrise, hands blistered anew but spirit unburdened. And as days turned into weeks, she proved what she had claimed, mending broken rails with precision, organizing supplies so efficiently that waste dropped by half, cooking meals that fueled men through long drives. And when a storm threatened, to scatter cattle across the plains she rode, out beside the crew, her body moving with purpose, her voice steady over the howl of wind. Respect came not as applause, but as nods, as space made at the table, as questions asked for her opinion rather than over her head. And with each act of acknowledgement, she grew not smaller to fit the world, but larger in confidence to shape it. The town that once whispered began to watch, and some still judged, because small minds cling to old narratives. But others began to reconsider what worth looked like, and young girls who saw her ride past no longer saw just a widow or a body that did not match a narrow ideal. They saw competence, resilience, and self-respect. The cowboy remained steady at her side, sometimes offering advice, sometimes receiving it. And though affection quietly rooted between them, it was built on admiration first, attraction second, proving that love grown from respect is far sturdier than love sparked by appearance. One evening, as the sun painted the horizon in gold and crimson, she stood on that same porch where she had once braced for humiliation, and she realized that the most powerful reply the cowboy had given her was not merely his words, but the standard he set that no one gets to define a person's value by size, status, or sorrow. Her silence had been broken not by romance, but by recognition. And in reclaiming her voice, she had also given others permission to reclaim theirs. So if you are listening to this story and carrying your own version of no one chooses someone like me, let this be a reminder that your worth is not negotiated in whispers, but demonstrated in courage. And sometimes all it takes is one steady voice to reflect back the strength you forgot you had. Stories like this are not just about widows and cowboys. They are about anyone who has stood on the edge of dismissal and chosen instead to declare what they can do. And if this chapter stirred something in you, if you believe in stories that challenge shallow judgments and celebrate resilience, make sure you subscribe to this channel and join a community that honors grit, growth, and the kind of courage that turns rejection into redemption. Because the next story might just be the one that changes your life.